Welcome to Voices of the Vigilant, where we dive deep into the human side of tech. Here, we go beyond the ones and zeros to explore the people, passions, and stories driving the cyber and internet security world. In each episode, we bring together experts, rebels, and innovators from across the tech industry to share their personal journeys, challenges, and victories. And here's your host and rebel in charge at Vigilant Violet, Jess Vachon.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And I'm going to tell you, sit back because I have a long intro for you, but it's a great intro. Today's guest is amazing. She has one of those careers that makes you realize how much is possible when you refuse to be put in a box. She's a GRC leader, a podcast host, a published author, a pageant coach, a liturgical dance executive, a co-founder of a health advocacy organization serving over 7 million women. And somehow she still finds the time to build Lego sets and paint diamond art. I mean, honestly, that is awesome. Monica Reagor is the manager of information security compliance at Crestron Electronics, the chairwoman of the Privacy and Data Security Workgroup for the National Association of Black Compliance and Risk Professionals. That's NABCRMP for anyone who's keeping score. And she's also the host of MY GRC POV podcast, a podcast all about the evolving world of governance, risk, and compliance. It is amazing. Go listen to it after this episode. She brings together technical expertise, a deep passion for DEI, and cybersecurity, and a leadership philosophy rooted in the emotional intelligence and cultural awareness. And I cannot wait to get into all of it with her. I started earlier, but now you get to hear the rest of it. Monica, welcome to the Voices of the Vigilant podcast.
Thank you so much, Jess. I really appreciate being here. I'm super excited to be a part of your community and having a really good conversation. So we're going to continue from what we were having backstage. So
yeah. All right. Well, I like to dig into everyone's kind of background and their origin story. So I'm going to start that with you. Springfield, Illinois, correct?
Yep.
And then Virginia Beach. Is that where you're at now?
Nope. So I traveled a little bit more. So born in Springfield, Illinois. I'm a Navy brat. So I was born in Scott Air Force Base. I always say that my family traveled for like the first 5 or 6 years of my life. And then we finally landed in Virginia Beach, where it's a huge Navy community. So I was raised in Virginia. And then shortly, like after 20 years, my parents divorced and my mother became really sick. So she relocated back to Louisiana after the divorce, and that's her home state. In 2008, I worked for Bank of America, and of course, there was that big recession. And so I decided to take the severance package and head on to Louisiana to be with my mom before she passed a few years later. And so I worked in, that was interesting because I did a lot of, like, my working background was in IT. I was an implementation engineer. I did help desk analysis. I supported commercial credit cards. I did client education. And then when I moved to Louisiana, I was like, okay, well, let me find a job in IT. So I applied for a position as an IT technician at a transit agency there. And they were like, oh, we're going to hire you. Absolutely. But I got a question. I was like, sure. What's that question? And they said, well, you speak well. You seem really personable. Would you be interested in compliance? And I was like, sure, because I got bills to pay. So if you're training, I'm down for it. Right. And so they said, yeah, we'll, train you in it. So day one, I jumped headfirst in compliance, never considered it as a career, never looked at it as a career option for me. But like anyone, you want to do something, whatever you put before you, you're going to excel at it. And I did. And I absolutely loved it. I got a chance. This level of compliance got me into the community, specifically wanting to make sure that there was diversity and inclusion in the community for Title 6 and 7. To make sure like the schedules were in varying languages for the master of our community, et cetera. But what I understood is that compliance can transcend any industry and any field. And so the opportunity came where now I'm in New Jersey, and my company relocated me. So I get to do both, which is now cybersecurity and compliance. And now, which is the big overall title, which is information security compliance. And I love it. It's growing. It covers governance, risk, and compliance. It's not just either you can have programming skills like I have, or you have the soft skills like I have now, which is writing policies and risk assessments and threat modeling, things like that. And then now we have AI. So there's now AI and data security and all of those things. So it's an exciting time. But yeah, I've traveled a bit. Traveled a bit.
Nice. So, in my own experience getting into the GRC side of things, I started on the technical side and then learned the GRC. I'm always curious. I know what my challenges were. What were your early challenges in figuring out what does GRC mean? What regulations am I trying to follow? What frameworks? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So that is a really great question. I think I'm gonna answer it in three frameworks. One of the bigger challenges was understanding what was compliance, and we're talking like early 2012, 2013, 2014, because most people consider compliance as being some form of legal profession, and it still is considered that. But you were like the only people that were compliance professionals were lawyers or adjacent legal professionals like secretaries or paralegals or um, um, clerks, court of clerks or clerks of court individuals, not necessarily people like myself who, like you, go from the technical side of technology to now GRC. So understanding that nuance, and then I being an anomaly, right? Because I didn't go to law school for this, but I am damn good at what I do, right? I can read legislation, break it down, understand what, I could say governmentese, speak governmentese, speak to my executive team, senior management team, exactly what it's asking for, and then I have to break those items down into tasks for my engineers. So I have to translate that information into engineering or tech speak. And so I didn't fit the specific mode. So understanding what compliance was and how it can impact varying industries was a challenge. Also, because my path wasn't like many in the early parts of my career, I was always well, you're not going to get very far. You're not going to be as successful because you didn't meet, I didn't meet the status quo then. But I'm a little scrappy when it comes to what I do, right? I love getting my hands in and figuring it out, and I did. And every opportunity, good, bad, or the ugly, I made it my own. Either it was a lesson learned or a win for me to refine or reflect on. The other challenge was is the when I was hired for my current role, it was just to be able to lead my company into government certifications for products that we have. um, Almost day one, they added security to my plate. And so immediately I was already, working outside of my job duties. But I told my boss at the time, I said, you do know this is going to grow, right? Because technology is picking up. People are looking around at technology for, more sensitive information, et cetera, et cetera. And they were like, yeah, but it won't be that big of a deal because it hasn't been. It's just like doing those disaster recovery plans. And you say, well, if there's a pandemic, what's your contingency? Well, everyone's like, oh, this hasn't been a pandemic in 100 years. And then, dang on it, if I ain't crazy enough, we had one like 4 months later, right? Um, and then it immediately made it us aware that we had so many gaps in our technology because we didn't expect, we assumed that there would never be a pandemic and people will be working from home, and it was viable for people to work from home and conquer the world, right? At that point, instantly, my career evolved, and then it became into demand. At the same time, that's when you're talking about AI, and that started to generate. So trying to keep up with pace of the changing scope and demand has also been another challenge for me because, again, I'm good, but trying to get those who don't had at some point didn't see the market value of security, they knew they needed it just so they can say they have secure products or services, but not understanding its value. And then you're the person on the other side that's saying, no, this is valuable. But the third thing that made it challenging is trying to articulate matrices around security and its costs. because if you're using tools, if you're using, you're bringing in experts or advisory services, it costs and it's substantial because it's in demand. How do I articulate the cost value of bringing in someone from security or these resources or in compliance or, making these changes so we can sell in varying markets and regionally or demographically as a value when we don't make money? So the change that what I've developed over time is, no, I don't make the money, but I protect your money, right? Because at the end of the day, we had the CrowdStrike issue a couple of years ago when it was a bad deployment of software, shut half the world down, impacted travel. It was a big deal. It wasn't a hack. It was just they didn't follow secure software deployment principles, and because of that impact, it was uh, it was great for me, and I say that loosely because now I have data to prove when we don't follow these frameworks or these principles, it has financial impact. So, like Delta sued Microsoft because Microsoft was the fourth party that was of the third party of CrowdStrike, right? And it impacted their sales. Then we're talking $66 billion, and we're talking blah blah blah. So now you have all of this money coming out against varying third or fourth party vendors. And now with the US NIST standards, they've evolved to include supply chain risk management, which means that you not only manage your own environment or framework, but you also have to manage your third party. So let's say you're using a cell phone, but the cell phone is connected to AWS. AWS is your fourth party. So now you have to make sure that they're managing their third party, which is your fourth party. So now there's this big trend. So it's all of that, but there's this level of accountability because everybody has to understand that data itself is very fluid. And that's one of the bigger challenges around AI. So those are the three challenges I've had in compliance as a whole. Is one, just operating out of the status quo. Two, trying to understand how that transcends in so many different fields when I didn't meet the legal professional pathway. And third is this, since 2020 has been a huge race, and it's been a sprint, not a marathon, to keep up, to remain successful and viable, and then to lead your organization in such a way that they continue to, develop revenue so we all can go on PTO and go on vacation.
Yeah. What PTO on vacation? What is that?
Exactly. That's what I keep saying. They're like, Monica, you need to use time. And I'm like, I know.
I love that you touched upon the showing of value because that is, I think, a central struggle for information security professionals as a whole. And there's been attempts to do that, right? FAIR is an attempt to say, okay, there's some valuation that goes along with everything that we're doing here. In my personal experience, I've found that there's a lot of resistance to that. So I have done the same thing you've done, and is look at certain incidents and say, okay, let's look at this in light of governance, risk, and compliance.
Yep.
The value I can grab here and say, well, this is what the cost of this incident might look like. But if we do A, B, and C, we can avoid that cost.
Yeah.
So while I'm not directly bringing revenue into the organization,
Yeah.
I can help you from having additional expenses that drain that revenue.
Yeah.
You have to look at me kind of in a different light. Have you seen the same resistance in your work?
Oh, yeah. So just recently we have evolved our compliance program to include some new tools, and that's because of the world has evolved. So let's just talk about it. So in the standard world of compliance, there's always been some form of compliance tool, like some of the more prevalent ones are like Archer and 360 compliance and Keylight and LockPath and all of those guys. And there's usually, depending upon the type of compliance that you support, or the initiative that you're driving, it could be ethics and compliance, it could be energy and compliance, it could be retail, FSC or FCC, whatever that compliance is. But there's always a risk register, there's always a risk assessment, there's always, the likelihood, and then your development. Around cybersecurity, just recently, there's a ton of frameworks, but it's always been trying to map certifications and standards across each other, right? And so like the NIST standards were created for the federal government, but the enterprise and commercial was like, we're going to use them. So, because there's, obviously it's a standard and it's like 1,000 controls. So the likelihood of you being in compliant or meeting industry standards is quite high. Then you have like the ISO 27001, then you have SOC 2 that's on board, and they all map back to 853 in some way, shape, or form. Okay, great. So you need a tool to, uh, it's easier to have a tool to map across frameworks without it being done manually, because quiet as it kept, we're pretty expensive in our information security world. So if we're going to, manage our resources well, we don't want them mapping, doing administrative work that could be done somewhere else. And so like I was telling my boss, I said, listen, we have to upgrade there in order for us to be scalable, resilient, and the more data analytics that we're required to produce evidence around audits and things of that nature. I need a tool. And so just recently here, probably in the last maybe 7 years, but more recently in the last 5 years, there are tools specifically coming out for information security that are around using the frameworks, that are collecting evidence like right into your AWS, Azure, or Google, or whatever your cloud security process is. You can do risk registers. And then there's this standard around CVSS scoring, all of those things. And I'm like, I can do this right in this tool. Well, the tool can be a bit expensive. So now I don't bring in revenue. I'm already expensive as an individual personnel in our budget because we are skill in demand. And then you have, you're asking me to, cough up like $150K, $200,000, whatever it is for this platform. To do what? How am I gonna get the ROI? And that's when you have to get innovative and creative, and having that conversation around security to say, "I am protecting your revenue." And so because of these tools, I'm able to now track when we have a new sale that comes into our organization and they're like, "Hey, before we now," and this is the shift in the paradigm, because companies, because of the legislation and regulations that are taking place, and they're putting the mandate on companies to ensure that whoever you're purchasing from and whatever you're purchasing is following these industry standards. Most people cannot even get past the purchasing process and actually get a invoice or a quote unless they pass a security assessment. Well, I can now track that with using these tools. So if a sale is a couple $100,000, that's great. So I complete the questionnaire, we get all the information to them. We have now impacted $200,000. Imagine if we do that all year. Now you can say, I've impacted this much revenue for our company. This is your ROI. So without that, it is very challenging. But if you tackle the tools that are out there, and like I said, just recently, there's a new kid on the block for the last couple of years that has done a fantastic job to really capturing the low level of analytics. It has been the reason why it's been such a slow burn to really amp up the security posture in an organization, is because the top level executives at the end of the day, their bottom line is, I need to know how much the money we're going to make, or how much it's going to cost me, or what it's going to prevent, kind of thing. So hopefully I answered that question. There's a lot to that, but
Yeah, no, that was great. And I think you touched upon this, and I'll just say it for those folks who didn't clearly get it. GRC can be used for marketing. It can be
yeah.
used for winning contracts. That's what you're speaking to. I've done it. I helped one of the organizations I work for become compliant with 800-171.
Oh, risk management. Yeah.
Yeah, which allowed them to compete for and win government contracts worth a lot of money, over millions of dollars of money. So that program that it took me 3 years to stand up was paid for several times over. And then what do? We use that as part of our marketing to
Yep.
get more business,
Yep.
right? So it's our job as GRC professionals to educate the leadership
Yep.
on a different way of thinking about the money that they're putting into the tools that we need to run the business. Because if they're only looking at, oh, it's 100,000, it's 150,000, and they're not looking at, but I'm going to bring in $20 million contract for you.
Exactly.
You have to look at it holistically. And I think, CISOs have been told you're supposed to be the business operator of information security. And that's true. But we need others to listen to us. We need the business to listen to us when we're advising you. Yes, we need this tool.
Yeah.
And it will also do B, C, D, and E.
Yep.
You have to listen to that whole case. You have to be looking long range because that's what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Every security professional, we're thinking about, we're not looking back, we're thinking about today, and then we're trying to anticipate what's coming in the future.
And that's part's hard sometimes because, oftentimes my boss asks me, Monica, in all fairness to them, they're not necessarily in my field, but obviously they're my reporting boss. And so they're like, well, we need to be able to forecast. I'm like, forecast what? Because it's what I see now, like literally there's over 200 regulations or changes or amendments to regulations every single day. Probably like 30% of it is probably cybersecurity in some way, shape, or form, privacy, data security, blah, blah, blah. Across all demographics, right? And so I have had to learn to become a really good storyteller, meaning paint the picture for them, but it just leave the caveat that it's probably going to change tomorrow, right? AI has freaked everybody out. And then you're talking about biometrics and, AI biases and what does that look like? How does that work? But everybody wants to implement AI, not out of the sense of being dismissive to those challenges and, um, uh, vulnerabilities, if you want to say that loosely, but really because they just want to remain competitive. And I'm like, no, hold on. There's these frameworks that we need to work through to ensure that we're not only implementing something that is authentic and true, but it's also we're being able to protect our end users, our buyers, and ourselves with a tool that potentially, with if it doesn't have any guardrails or some form of guidance, could cause detrimental harm. So um, our role has changed more from not just the tech side of, yeah, these are the standards, like, 800, 171. These are the behaviors that you have to execute. These are the policies you have to have in place. And then this is the evidence of collecting that you are executing over a period of time regularly. Now it's, you have to be almost like a therapist to think about like all the potential harm that, this new tool that could cause, as well as project and forecast what's coming down the pipeline. I mean, there's been whispers, and I suspect in probably in the next 18 months or 24 months, we're going to start to hear more about it. But, the EU is already looking to reconsider and change their GDPR process. Well, to include AI and what that looks like for us. Well, that's going to shift how we do cookies. That's going to shift how we, collect data and data, subject data subject requests, because people want, if they don't want their data used in the AI tool, how do you eliminate that? Well, that's difficult to figure out. So we're going to have to figure that out. So there's just a lot of different nuances and that's evolving. And so to your point, it is it's overwhelming, but it's a selling point. And so as professionals in the GRC space, we have to always live in at the intersection of being strategists or architects or solutionists, understanding the tech side of it, especially in information security, but also being the business um, driver or basically the business driver to say, I do understand what the business objective is. How do we meet in the middle? Here's my deadline if we want to meet whatever requirements that we're trying to meet. But here's what I need to understand from you. Can you give me resources? Because a lot of times in an information space, at least for me in engineering, I need resource time to develop a product, right? And that doesn't always align with what we got coming down the pipeline. So it is interesting to leverage the what's going on in the world and what they're asking us for us to do. I always tell my team, at some point my little tap shoes are going to run out. So, give me what I'm looking for, or tell me what I got so I can work with. Outside of that, we're going to always be one step behind. So I think really making sure that we are not um, operating in one mode, but we're operating in a way that the business sees us as a solutionist, is the way the role of GRC is evolving. And then for those who are heavy on the tech side, you become an engineer. Like some people's like, oh, I'm a penetration, tester or something like that. Dude, if you can read policies and procedures and articulate that, you are already halfway there of becoming an expert in GRC engineering, because now you can automate. You know exactly what it needs to be done to write code to automate something.
Yeah. I love everything that you just said because it speaks to how everything's becoming more interconnected. because there used to be a division you could see between the technical folks and the GRC, but it's not so anymore. A state passes an AI regulation.
Oh my gosh.
The technical teams bring in AI solutions and trying to secure those. But that one regulation can affect your implementation. Not only that, if you're subject to GLBA or SOX or something like that, now you've got all these other pieces that are interconnected. If you're working in Europe, you have GDPR and their AI regulations that are coming into play. So it's no longer a simple choice of, we're just going to bring this tool in and we'll adapt policy to go with it. No, there's 50 states in one country that are all developing different regulations.
Yes.
The federal government's developing the regulations. The EU's doing their own thing. UK is doing their own thing. And let's not forget, there's also Australia and Asia Pacific. If you're doing business in those areas,
they are
their own regulations.
Yes, and they're extremely security conscious. Like Singapore, Asia, Australia, New Zealand are, I think, in my opinion, probably the most security conscious organizations or countries in demographics. And then you have India right behind them. They oh my goodness, the level of work that I have to do to support their demographics and their requirements. I mean, I understand it, but it does require organizations to step up. And the interesting part is I also, the flip side of that is, of course, our current administration has relaxed a lot of our cybersecurity requirements. And so I get questions around, well, for instance, let's use secure software deployment. So there's been a reduction of some of the it being required. It's up to the agency to determine if they really want to use that as a framework as part of their purchasing and architecture or designing their infrastructure in their environments. And I had a customer call me and says, "Hey, we noticed that you guys are reducing that. Are you not following, secure software deployment requirements?" And I said, "No, we are, because we sell in your market. So we're going to always, posture ourselves against the most restrictive regulations. And at this point, it is the EU. So if you're selling in the EU space, don't change it. Just stay where you are."
Yeah, and the reason we do that is because for GRC professionals, it's easier for us just to maintain one stricter way of operating than to say, okay, in Europe I'm going to be really strict, but in the US I'm going to be less strict. No, that's way too much work. So I'm glad you pointed that out. We're going to default to whatever's the strictest because we know that's going to be the safest and the easier to administer globally if we have to administer it globally.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at a conference once. What year is this? 2026, last year. There was a lawyer on the panel, and I specifically asked this question: what was his thoughts? And he said, "No one's going to ever fail you for being more secure. So just continue to operate in that space, no matter what the current changes are to the legislation in the U.S., because at some point it will revert back or become more restrictive at some time. But no one has ever failed an audit for being too strict. They have only failed an audit when there was no guardrails in place. So, to your point, there's no harm in it. It does ask for us to develop a strong posture in security when we follow those more restrictive policies. But if you have a strategist that's leading your team, your strategist is going to find, like, again, I used 853 as the foundation for all security certifications, ISO, SOC 2. If you manage all 1,000 or so of those controls that apply to your environment, it doesn't matter if it's hardware or not, you're most likely are going to be compliant to all the other certifications around, NIS2, which is EU directives, and et cetera. And then now you have the EU AI Act that's coming into is now in effect for highly sensitive software applications. Manage those standards, and for the most part, you can confidently say I am, meeting all the industry standards. And then OOPS, OOPS just came out with an AI top 10 or something just recently, and people are still trying to figure that part out. And I'm like, yeah, well, everybody's coming out with their frameworks. I was still mad at NIST though. They first came out like a concept of paper, when AI came out last year or the year before last, and I was like, "What is that?" They were like, "Just follow the 853 standards and go from there." And I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And so they just released, I think it's last month or February, their approach. Still missing the controls that I'm looking for, but their approach to AI specifically. And but I suspect it's going to be another 3 to 5 years before we have a solid foundation and understanding of AI tool, the same way we came down to GDPR, and then they added it into the NIST standards. So
Yeah, I've kind of been grinning as you've been talking because what everyone who's listening should hear is GRC is layers and layers and layers. And I was grinning because every time I think about layers, I think about the episode from the Shrek movie where Shrek said
yeah,
he's like an onion, he's got layers.
he is layered.
And GRC is layers and layers and layers and layers, but there's a core.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about is if you can concentrate on this one area and build
Yep.
out from there, a lot of it's interconnected. And that is a great way to view the broader governance, risk, and compliance landscape. Now, what we know in 2026 is GRC is bumping up against the attitude of move fast and break things,
Yeah.
which is great for innovation. It may be great for revenue, but someone is held accountable at the end, and it's usually those of us in GRC.
Yeah.
So when we're running alongside of you saying, okay, I see you're breaking things, but we need to keep an inventory of what you're breaking, and maybe we need to figure out better ways to not break stuff. Here's why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Because at some point, someone has to be held responsible and or assume the risk, and I need to have accountability for that. So
Yeah.
let's come to an agreement.
Yeah, like, keep
be
me
done.
abreast of what's happening. I tell my teams that all the time, and I take my whole engineering team, like, they're my team, and there's obviously, we have hundreds and hundreds of engineers, and I'm like, "Just tell me what's happening, so I know what's going to what's happening down the pipeline," and so, you know, and again, my engineers are amazing, they're brilliant at breaking things down, but to your point, they will bust it wide open, and then I'm like, "What is all of this? What's happening?" And they're like, "Well, we thought." No, you're supposed to let me know what's going on at first. And because if I don't, then, of course, senior management will come and ask me questions like, "Hey, are we so and so? Hey, are we so and so?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What are you talking about?" And, and you don't want that coming from your compliance person because they need to be in the know. And that's the other side of that is GRC is no longer a silo, right? Because back in early 2000, at least, it was more of a silo. They came out. Either you had one or two people who were on the audit team. They'll come out and they'll chit chat with you and they say, "Hey, are you doing this? Check, whatever, whatever." Now you have to build relationships because if you do not, you will never be in the beginning of design or in the beginning of those conversations. Or if you're in GRC and purchasing or supply chain, you're not in the beginning of those acquisitions because if you're then there and then you get it at the end, they're like, "Oh yeah, just bring in compliance." You're like, "What the heck is this? You guys, we can't do this, or you shouldn't have done this, or whatever it is." We can't help support the business objective if we're always at the end. So instead of us being the no candidate or the queen or king of no, I tell my team, "I'm not no, but if you bring me in early enough, I will work with you to build a solution that will meet the regulation and allow you to innovate. But if you miss that whole that part or remove me from that pipeline, all I can do is say no because I'm still accountable to how we show ourselves compliant to whatever we market as being secure."
Exactly. And we can facilitate the move fast part. That's why we have a risk register.
Exactly.
Or a plan of action and milestones or a nonconformities list. That's where
Exactly.
we capture that. So we'll capture it there in the short term, ensuring that you understand that you are being okay with the risk. And then you can move as fast as you want. And we'll come back and say, okay, as we're doing our monthly check on the risk register, or we're checking progress on the plan of action and milestones, or we're reviewing our nonconformities, we're gonna take that opportunity for you to come back and tighten things up a little bit. So
Yeah.
I think your overall message here is work with us, trust us.
Absolutely.
We got you, but you have to bring us to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are in GRC and compliance, come to the table with solution.
Right.
And if you don't know it, that's okay. Just say, I'm not sure. Let me reach out to my colleagues in the field. I do it all the time. Like I am not, I may sound intelligent right now, but I am not the end all be all to anything. Like when we're talking about risk analytics, that is not, I know what both of those words are. I can run a script in Excel, but there's like some nuances about risk analytics that I am not an expert in, but I do have someone in the field that is. So I'd be like, "Hey, can I, steal 15 minutes of your time? I have a few questions. This is what I'm trying to accomplish." And usually if we build a community around, government risk and compliance, we're all successful because to your point earlier, everything is interwoven and we're all there's a shared responsibility for every organization. So we're either buying a solution or service from someone, there's some risk that's involved. We all need to come together and be able to say, hey, if you do this, this will work. It makes you more secure. So if I ever come down the pipeline and try to buy from you, I already know that you have this stuff in place. It's a win-win for everyone if we work together. And because our community is such a niche, and again, depending on what industry that you're in, a lot of the tools and principles, they transcend across each field or position. And there's still positions out there that we probably need that we haven't, developed yet.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm going to pivot us off of
Sure.
GRC a little bit. Is it true that you're studying law and policy?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So at Liberty University, I am a student for law and policy.
And the goal there is?
So yeah, my goal is to wrap that up and then go and to get my law degree, and so a Juris Master's in compliance. That's my long-term goal, and that's probably in the next 3 years. I'm almost done. I do not want to be a lawyer, but I know I have no interest. But I do. I don't. But I do understand the importance. I spend a lot of time, hours upon hours. And again, this is before AI was implemented to the public, reading legislation. And then I have to turn that stuff over. And I'm writing responses to either customers or government agencies. Do you do this? For instance, do you ensure that you don't use any malicious code? The answer is no, we know we don't use malicious code in our products or services, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's language that legal wants to use or declarations. Well, this is where my relationship with the legal team, they'll reach out to me and say, "Hey, Monica, what's our policy around, malicious code? What standards are we following, et cetera, et cetera." So I write it up. And what I've noticed is even though I don't have a law degree, my legal team will take what I say and put it in the legal document and says, "This is what we're doing." And it's not that I'm perfect or right, but the fact that they trust the voice out of what I'm able to interpret out of that language really says, "Okay, you already have a niche for this, and you should, maximize it." So I'm always in a state of learning and growing. And so yeah, law and policy is my thing. The tech stuff we all can learn on the fly, and if not, ask AI. Uh, and so there's plenty of ways to practice and create yourself a GitHub and jump in, but just really trying to refine my work is what I want.
Yeah, I want to highlight that when we make investments in ourselves, we're also making investments in the businesses we work for. So if you're a business owner out there, a business leader, and we come to you and say, we want funding for training, this is why. It's not
Yeah,
just because we want to have another certification or, it's something we want to tout. It's because there's a skill that we think we want to have that we think is going to make us better at our work. And you just highlighted it perfectly. I mean, you're
yeah,
already there. You're just saying, there's some pieces I think I'm missing. But hey,
absolutely.
I'm going to use this at work. And it's going to, if the legal team doesn't have to spend an extra 15, 30 minutes reviewing what I'm writing, that's a plus for everybody.
Oh,
Goes back to the move
absolutely.
faster aspect that we talked about a few minutes ago.
Oh, absolutely. My legal team is awesome, and I honor their perspective and the fact that they have confidence in me when it comes to making sure that we're right on target, right? If everyone is gearing up for the EU Cybersecurity Resilience Act that is being incremented in phases, 2026 September, I think, and then end of these 2027. And they're already asking me like, "Where are we with this, Monica? And how are we approaching this?" And I'm like, "Dude, I've been working on this for 2 years already. Like, covertly, like, because what I've done is map these requirements already to 853. So as long as we're meeting this, most like 90% of it we're going to already meet. And they're like, "Oh, you're dope, Monica." And so I'm able to articulate those conversations. And that is what builds relationships. Like my sales team, they'll come to me in a heartbeat. "Hey, can we do this? Are we allowed to do that?" My market team is a little different. They like to say, "Yeah, we're doing this." I'm like, "When?" So it's one of those. It's educating them to say that we are like security is ever evolving, and so our posture always has to grow and mature. And even though I think like we're really secure, even if you get an ISO 27001 or a SOC 2 report, it's still operational over time. And so you just have to be um, always in the forefront in the mind of how we're going to grow, how we're going to mature. But to your point earlier, that we find that core value as your foundation, but everything else is an extra policy, an extra procedure, extra playbook.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about NABCRMP because I'm not going to say the whole name out again. You're the chairperson of the privacy and data security work group for that organization. Talk a little bit about the purpose of the organization and your work and the meaning it has for you.
Yeah, so it's the National Association of Black Compliance and Risk Management Professionals, or better known as NABCRMP. And so NABCRMP is an organization that started, and it's its first of one of a kind, meaning there was no affinity group as of 2020 for Black compliance and risk management professionals, because when you get people of like minds and walks of life, there's always a synergy that's built. And so our founder built this organization so that Black professionals that are in this field of GRC and this niche has a place to come together and to share ideas, to become a think tank around how do we create more awareness in the field of GRC and risk management and governance. Like just probably in the last maybe 5 years, I want to say maybe the last 3 has been more visible, but there's now compliance programs, right? Back then, it was just go to law school. That was it, and you became a compliance person. Now there's just more compliance programs. There's more risk management programs. There's more development around cybersecurity programs. So it's a great way to meet really talented individuals. Even on my podcast, I've met many of those guests through NABCRMP, and they are amazing. And some of the things that they're um, driving, their initiatives. But what I've also discovered is that we also have some of the shared challenges of being overlooked in the room, being dismissed in the room, et cetera, et cetera. And so we encourage each other when we're going through those types of situations. My specific role is privacy and data security, which is the overarching work group for anything cybersecurity and AI. And what I get are individuals who are interested in cybersecurity, privacy, or data security because it implies in their entire life. Like there's people that are working in healthcare, there's people that are in my group that are in retail, telecommunications, financial crime, et cetera. And they want to know what's coming down the pipeline with cybersecurity. And then I also have college students who are in my work group who are like, okay, which framework should I study? What are some of the things I need to know going into the field? Because although they cybersecurity degrees are great, they teach a lot of theory, but there's not a lot of hands-on experience. And our field, specifically in cybersecurity or information security, we really require people to have really some working idea of how to build a GitHub or repository, how to, spot encryption, whatever that looks like. And so that's what I provide. Everything I just shared here is usually what I'm telling them in our work group. So we do virtual events, lunch and learns. I'll get experts to come in for about 40 minutes to share their tips and ideas. We talk about branding, your personal brand that, back in like 2000, it was just, fill out your resume or send your resume in, fill out an application. Now you need to have a personal brand. You have to have a network. You got to be able to prove that you can articulate or produce whatever portfolio that your expertise that you have. So it's evolved, and some people now, especially right now, where there's over 300,000 Black women who are unemployed, and they all have either master's or doctorate degrees. It's insane. However, they're trying to figure out how to transition. And so what are the transferable skills? And I'm like, if you run operational risk, you can do GRC. This is how you do it. If you are a person that has provided oversight, you probably can do governance. This is how you do it. And so in my work group, I had the opportunity to share the knowledge that I've shared, or we come together and put the pieces together. And also this is where I build, like I said earlier, my colleagues in the field. If I know someone's in healthcare and they're doing something similar in privacy, I'll reach out to them because obviously they're more heavily regulated in privacy. Say, what are your thoughts on this? And they'll give me their opinion, and I can actually translate that into what I'm doing in whatever initiative at my company. So that's my work group, but we have approximately 11 work groups in our organization right now that's active. We're always looking for individuals to either partner with or to create a space where, and no, you don't have to be a person of color, but we do create a space where everyone has an opportunity to contribute and learn. And so we're all, there's the summit's coming up in October, and then we usually have a virtual career fair where those who are employers are looking for people in GRC in September. And then I'm always on a panel somewhere trying to speak to highlight the importance of GRC and cybersecurity.
And how do people join the organization? If they
Yeah, absolutely. Go to www.nabcrmp.org.
Thanks. That's great, because I know that was a lot of great information. I'm thinking, well, how would I join?
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I'm like, man.
So I have a bazillion other questions for you, but we're not going to have time during this episode.
No.
So I'm gonna insist that you come back and we do it.
Absolutely. I love it. I think you're fantastic, Jess.
Oh, thank you. But before I go, I want you to plug my GRC POV. So the floor is yours.
Yeah. So if you ever get a little bit of time, definitely tune into my GRC POV. You can also listen to some past episode on my website, www.mygrcpov.com. We launch, I drop an episode every other week, so bi-weekly. So our next episode will drop April 29th. You're going to love that episode. We're going to talk about data equity from a demographics perspective. I write my GRC POV often, either through the podcast or long form, and you can follow me on mygrcpov.substack.com. I do a lot of expansive writing there, just my thoughts and opinions. But follow me on LinkedIn under Monica Reagor, and or Instagram if you're interested. Yeah, I'm super excited to be a part of this space.
Monica, thank you so much for being on Voices of the Vigilant. This conversation has been more than I hoped for, and I've enjoyed the conversation. Folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, please like us on your favorite streaming platform and subscribe, and go to my GRC POV and like it there and subscribe as well. Until next time, everyone, stay vigilant. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Voices of the Vigilant. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and leave a review in your favorite podcast app. For a copy of the transcript, to follow Jess, to apply as a guest of the show, or to learn more about services from Vigilant Violet, please visit vigilantviolet.com. Until next time, stay vigilant.